Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Brooke. I am a 28-year-old remote tech employee, and on this channel, we like to talk about all things personal finance and getting better with our money. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, please make sure that you subscribe so that you can get notified about every new video that I put out. Today, I want to talk about 5 money mistakes you make in the beginning when you're just starting out with budgeting. Budgeting can be really hard when you're starting out, and so I want to help you know the different pitfalls that you could run into when you're first starting so that you don't make those mistakes in the beginning. And so to help us with this list, I did ask our friend ChatGPT for some of their suggestions, but this will also be based off of my own experiences. So going off of ChatGPT's number 1, ChatGPT says not tracking expenses early on. I 100% agree with this. If you're not tracking your expenses, then you don't know where your money is going. That's why there are a lot of services out there like Rocket Money that helps you find subscriptions that you forgot to cancel, because it can be really easy to rack up a bunch of expenses when you have things on auto pay, if you signed up for something in the past and you forgot about it. And it's just really easy to not know where your money is going when you start out. So I totally agree with this. You need to start tracking your expenses early. And if you haven't ever done this before and it seems really anxiety inducing, then what I actually recommend is going to your credit card or your debit card or anything like that. And there is a feature usually on these services where you can see your previous transactions and get those in a CSV format, which would then allow you to put them in a spreadsheet. And that way, you're not tracking them by hand like some people do, but it gives you a good understanding of what your expenses look like. And if you do it during a statement period, which is usually about a month, that'll give you a good look at what your money is going towards on a monthly basis. And so once you understand where your money is going each month, then you can start tracking on your own. And what I recommend is checking in at least once a week. And doing it once a week is probably the easiest because you're not doing it every single day, so you don't have to worry about it every single day, but you're not waiting till the end of the month where you might have a lot of tracked expenses and it might feel too overwhelming to even get started. All right, let's move on to mistake number 2. ChatGPT says that mistake number 2 is setting unrealistic budget goals. And I also completely agree with this sentiment. This is something that you have to be really honest with yourself when it goes into creating your budget. If you are someone who is spending a ton of money on takeout each month and you are like making your budget and saying, hey, I want to like only spend $50 on eating out, but you really actually spend $300 a month, you're going to start feeling really discouraged about budgeting. And so setting unrealistic budget goals is not going to make your life easier, even if you think that this is going to save me so much money, because honestly, you're just going to get frustrated with yourself that it didn't go the way you planned. So be honest with yourself, know how much money you're spending on a normal basis, and then from there, you can build your baseline. And then if you are trying to save money in certain categories in your budget, what I recommend doing is doing a step-down method. The step-down method is just where you take a certain category for that month. Let's say you're wanting to spend less on groceries, and then you say, okay, how can I reduce that spending this month? Let's try and save $50 in this category. And then each month, you're going to move down a little bit until you get to a budget that feels good for you, that feels sustainable for you. And then that's the number that you know that you can spend each month with not feeling deprived, with feeling like you're getting everything you need. All right, let's move on to number 3. ChatGPT says this is neglecting to account for irregular expenses. This is a really big mistake that a lot of people do when they first start out budgeting. And so what I recommend for this is to start sinking funds. Sinking funds are probably some of the most fun ways to save for these irregular expenses, and it's such a fun way for you to work towards a miniature goal that you know is achievable and then you get to spend that money at the end of that period the way that you want to. So for example, if you are going to spend money on a vacation, you know that vacation's coming up. If you weren't budgeting properly, then when that vacation came around, that would be an irregular expense. You're going on vacation. You're probably going to be eating out every single day that you're on vacation, and you probably didn't really think about that before you went on the vacation. With a sinking fund, you can set up a vacation sinking fund and say, hey, we have this vacation coming up in a few months, and to be able to pay for this vacation, we're going to set aside $200 each month until we get to the vacation. So having this sinking fund means that you don't have to worry about going into credit card debt or blowing up your monthly budget. So that's what I recommend if you find yourself seeing a bunch of irregular expenses throughout your month that you can plan ahead for. So for example, Christmas, that's a big one that people love spending money on. I also love spending money on Christmas and giving gifts. And so what my husband and I do is set aside money each month starting in January so that by the time we get to November, Black Friday sales, close to December, before Christmas, we have the money saved that we want to spend on other people's gifts, and we don't have to be stressed out about it. So if you are running into this issue, make sure that you are looking into starting some sinking funds. All right, now let's move on to number 4. ChatGPT says this is ignoring an emergency fund, which I totally agree with. There's a stat out there that says like somewhere around 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 that they can come up with if they run into an issue. And that's a big problem because if you don't even have $1,000 saved up in a mini emergency fund, then something like a big unexpected expense, like we talked about in the previous one, is going to set you back. You are going to have to find a way to get that money. And a lot of times for people, if they're not prepared for that, that means going into debt. So we don't want to go into debt. And so once we're budgeting, the big thing that we want to do is make sure that we do have those bases covered when it comes to setting aside money for those larger rainy day expenses. This could be a potential job loss. This could be a big medical emergency that is unplanned for. And so that's why we have our emergency fund. I always recommend having 3 to 6 months of living expenses in your emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of living expenses is the bare necessities. This does not include fun money. This means that you're setting aside money to pay your bills so that you're on time with your bills, that you have money for food, and that you have money for anything that is essential to life, like gas for your car and car insurance and stuff like that. It's not setting aside enough money so that you can go to Ibiza on a whim. So what you do to calculate this number is you take those essential expenses that you have in a month, and then you multiply that by either 3 or 6. And having 3 to 6 months living expenses will mean that if something major does happen, like a job loss, you don't have to be worried about what you're going to do during that time that you are looking for a new position. And finally, number 5, ChatGPT says this is not reviewing or adjusting your budget regularly. I agree with this to an extent, but I feel like once you start to get your finances in order, once you start to curb your impulse spending, this can be something that you don't have to do as often because you kind of got your budget dialed in. But before you get there, I definitely agree, especially if you're brand new to budgeting, that you should be reviewing your budget on a regular basis. I would say every 3 months, because 3 months of time gives you enough data to really see what kind of patterns you're creating. And this is definitely important if you're going through a bunch of life changes. Maybe you're having a kid or adopting an animal, or you're getting a raise. That's those things like that. That's when you'll need to re-look at your budget and see, hey, how do we change around these expenses so that we can make this fit into our lifestyle and not go into debt? So this is a great one. And finally, ChatGPT gave us a bonus tip, which I think is really cute. And I will give my own bonus tip. But ChatGPT's bonus tip is not including fun or wiggle room in the budget. And I also agree with this. You should always include a miscellaneous category in your budget, because sometimes you're going to buy stuff that might not fit in your categorizations. So having that miscellaneous is going to be helpful for you when you're starting to track your expenses regularly. But also, life is going to happen and you're going to want to go out with your friends. You're going to want to go out with family members. You're going to want to have a life. And that life doesn't have to be something where you deny yourself of fun. Having a budget means that you get to decide where your money goes. And if where your money is going is towards having great experiences with other people in your life that will make your life better, then this is totally something you should plan for. Just know that these should not get in the way of your saving and investing and debt goals. So when you're making your fun money category, make sure that it fits into the goals that you want to achieve. Now, my bonus mistake is making your budget too rigid. So what I did when I started out was I created like 15, 20 different categories for things. I made sure that everything was in a bunch of different subcategories. And honestly, that got really confusing very quickly, because then when I was going to the grocery store, I was like, well, part of this goes into this category and part of this goes into the groceries category. How do I decide where all this stuff goes? And it got really hard to know where each category should be. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who love the budgeting app You Need a Budget, YNAB for short. But I'm going to be honest and say that YNAB makes budgeting look more complicated than it actually is. You can have as little categories as you want when it comes to budgeting. It's your budget. But really what it needs to do is it needs to work for you. And if you make it too complex, you're not going to stick with it. You're not going to track your expenses regularly. And then you're going to be overspending your money and feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck. So when you're setting up your budget, start out small and then work your way from there. If you find that after you review your budget every quarter that you're starting to spend regularly in a category you don't have, maybe then it is time to add that category into your budget. But until then, it's okay if things are in larger buckets and then you want to get more complex as you go on. But don't start out overly complicated or you'll just give up after 2 weeks. So that's what I have for you all. My 5 budgeting mistakes for beginners. Please let me know in the comments below any budgeting mistakes that you made when you first started, and let's help each other live a better, healthier, wealthier life. Also, please make sure to like this video, subscribe, and I'll see you all in another one. Bye, everybody.